Judges, chapters 8 and 9. And the men of Ephraim said to Gideon, What is this that thou hast done to us, in that thou didst not call us when thou wentest to fight with Madian? And they chode with him sharply. And he said to them, What have I now done in comparison of you? Is not the gleaning of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? The Lord has delivered into your hand the princes of Madian, Oreb, and Zeb. And what could I do in comparison of you? Then was their spirit calm toward him, when he spoke this word. And Gideon came to Jordan, and went over, himself and the 300 with him, hungry, yet pursuing. And he said to the men of Succoth, Give, I pray you, bread to feed this people that follow me, because they are faint. And behold, I am following after Zebi and Salmana, kings of Madian. And the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebi and Salmana now in thy hand, that we should give bread to thy host? And Gideon said, Therefore, the Lord gives Zebi and Salmana into my hand. Then will I tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness, and the bark in them. And he went up thence to Phanuel, and spoke to them likewise. And the men of Phanuel answered him, as the men of Succoth had answered him. And Gideon said to the men of Phanuel, When I return in peace, I will break down this tower. And Zebi and Salmana were in Karkar, and their host was with them, about 15,000, all that were left of all the host of the aliens. And they that fell were 120,000 men that drew the sword. And Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents, eastward of Nabeh and Jegabal. And he smote the host, and the host was secure. And Zebi and Salmana fled, and he pursued after them, and took the 2 kings of Madian, Zebi and Salmana, and discomfited all the army. And Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from battle, down from the battle of Ares. And he took prisoner a young lad of the men of Succoth, and questioned him, and wrote to him the names of the princes of Succoth, and of their elders, 77 men. And Gideon came to the princes of Succoth, and said, Behold, Zebi and Salmana, about whom ye reproached me, saying, Are the hands of Zebi and Salmana now in thy hand, that we should give bread to thy men that are faint? And he took the elders of the city with the thorns of the wilderness, and the bark in them, and with them he tore the men of the city. And he overthrew the tower of Phanuel, and slew the men of the city. And he said to Zebi and Salmana, Where are the men whom ye slew in Tabor? And they said, As thou, so were they, according to the likeness of the son of a king. And Gideon said, They were my brethren, and the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if ye had preserved them alive, I would not have slain you. And he said to Jether his firstborn, Rise and slay them. But the lad drew not his sword, for he was afraid, for he was very young. And Zebi and Salmana said, Rise thou and fall upon us, for thy power is as that of a man. And Gideon arose and slew Zebi and Salmana. And he took the round ornaments that were on the necks of their camels. And the men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule, my lord, over us, both thou and thy son's son. For thou hast saved us out of the hand of Madian. And Gideon said to them, I will not rule, and my son shall not rule among you. The Lord shall rule over you. And Gideon said to them, I will make a request of you. And do ye give me every man an earring out of his spoils? For they have golden earrings, for they were Ishmaelites. And they said, We will certainly give them. And he opened his garment, and each man cast therein an earring of his spoils. And the weight of the golden earrings which he asked was 1,700 pieces of gold, besides the crescents, and the chains, and the garments, and the purple cloths that were on the kings of Madian, besides the chains that were on the necks of their camels. And Gideon made an ephod out of it, and set it in his city in Ephrathah, and all Israel went thither a-whoring after it, and it became a stumbling block to Gideon and his house. And Madian was straitened before the children of Israel, and they did not lift up their head any more. And the land had rest 40 years in the days of Gideon. And Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and sat in his house. And Gideon had 70 sons begotten of his body, for he had many wives. And his concubine was in Sychem, and she also bore him a son, and gave him the name Abimelech. And Gideon, son of Joash, died in his city, and was buried in the sepulchre of Joash his father, in Ephrathah of Abiezri. And it came to pass when Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned, and went a-whoring after Baalim, and made for themselves a covenant with Baal, that he should be their God. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of all that afflicted them round about. And they did not deal mercifully with the house of Jerubbaal, the same as Gideon, according to all the good which he did to Israel. And Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to Sychem to his mother's brethren, and he spoke to them and to all their kindred, and the house of his mother's father, saying, Speak, I pray you, in the ears of all men of Sychem, saying, Which is better for you, that 70 men, even all the sons of Jerubbaal, should reign over you, or that one man should reign over you? And remember that I am your bone and your flesh. And his mother's brethren spoke concerning him in the ears of all the men of Sychem all these words. And their heart turned after Abimelech, for they said, He is our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-berith, and Abimelech hired for himself vain and cowardly men, and they went after him. And he went to the house of his father to Ephrathah, and slew his brethren the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men upon one stone. But Joatham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, for he hid himself. And all the men of Sisima, and the house of Beth-Maalo, were gathered together, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of sedition, which was at Sisima. It was reported to Joatham, and he went and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted up his voice, and wept, and said to them, Hear me, ye men of Sisima, and God shall hear you. The trees went forth on the time to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive, Reign over us. But the olive said to them, Shall I leave my fatness, with which men shall glorify God, and go to be promoted over the trees? And the trees said to the fig tree, Come, reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, Shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruits, and go to be promoted over the trees? And the tree said to the vine, Come, reign over us. And the vine said to them, Shall I leave my wine that cheers God and men, and go to be promoted over the trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, Come thou, and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, If ye in truth anoint me to reign over you, come, stand under my shadow, and if not, let fire come out from me, and devour the cedars of Libanus. And now, if ye had done it in truth and integrity, and have made Abimelech king, and if ye have wrought well with Jerubbaal, and with his house, and if ye have done to him according to the reward of his hand, as my father fought for you, and put his life in jeopardy, and delivered you out of the hand of Madiam, and ye are risen up this day against the house of my father, and have slain his sons, being 70 men, upon one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his bondwoman, king over the men of Sisima, because he is your brother. If then ye have done truly and faithfully with Jerubbaal, and with his house this day, rejoice ye in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice over you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech, and devour the men of Sisima, and the house of Beth-Maalo. And let fire come out from the men of Sisima, and from the house of Beth-Maalo, and devour Abimelech. And Joatham fled, and ran away, and went as far as Beer, and dwelt there out of the way with his brother Abimelech. And Abimelech reigned over Israel 3 years. And God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Sisima. And the men of Sisima dealt treacherously with the house of Abimelech, to bring the injury done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, and to lay their blood upon their brother Abimelech, who slew them, and upon the men of Sisima, because they strengthened his hands to slay his brethren. And the men of Sisima set liars in the wait against him on the top of the mountains, and robbed every one who passed by them on the way. And it was reported to the king Abimelech. And Gaal, son of Jobel, came, and his brethren, and passed by Sisima, and the men of Sisima trusted in him. And they went out into the field, and gathered their grapes, and trod them, and made merry. And they brought the grapes into the house of their God, and ate and drank, and cursed Abimelech. And Gaal, the son of Jobel, said, Who is Abimelech, and who is the son of Sychem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal? Is not Zebul his steward, his servant with the son of Emor, the father of Sychem? And why should we serve him? And would this people were under my hand, then would I remove Abimelech, and I would say to him, Multiply thy host, and come out. And Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, son of Jobel, and he was very angry. And he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly, saying, Behold, Gaal, the son of Jobel, and his brethren are come to Sychem, and behold, they besiege the city against thee. And now rise up by night, thou and the people with thee, and lay wait in the field. And it shall come to pass in the morning at sunrising, thou shalt rise up early, and draw toward the city. And behold, he and the people with him will come forth against thee, and thou shalt do to him according to thy power. And Abimelech and all the people with him rose up by night, and formed an ambuscade against Sychem in 4 companies. And Gaal the son of Jubal went forth, and stood by the door of the gate of the city. And Abimelech and the people with him rose up from the ambuscade. And Gaal the son of Jubal saw the people, and said to Zebul, Behold, a people comes down from the top of the mountains. And Zebul said to him, Thou seest the shadow of the mountains as men. And Gaal continued to speak, and said, Behold, a people comes down westward from the part bordering on the middle of the land. And another company comes by the way of Helon, Meoneum. And Zebul said to them, And where is thy mouth as thou spokest? Who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Is not this the people whom thou despisest? Go forth now, and set the battle in array against him. And Gaal went forth before the men of Sychem, and set the battle in array against Abimelech. And Abimelech pursued him, and he fled from before him, and many fell down slain as far as the door of the gate. And Abimelech entered into Arumah, and Zebul cast out Gaal and his brethren, so that they should not dwell in Sychem. And it came to pass on the 2nd day that the people went out into the field, and one brought word to Abimelech. And he took the people, and divided them into 3 companies, and formed an ambush in the field. And he looked, and behold, the people went forth out of the city, and he rose up against them, and smote them. And Abimelech and the chiefs of the companies that were with him rushed forward, and stood by the door of the gate of the city. And the 2 other companies rushed forward upon all that were in the field, and smote them. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and took the city, and slew the people that were in it, and destroyed the city, and sowed it with salt. And all the men of the tower of Sychem heard, and came to the gathering of Beth-el-Berith. And it was reported to Abimelech that all the men of the tower of Sychem were gathered together. And Abimelech went up to the mount of Selman, and all the people that were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand, and cut down a branch of a tree, and took it, and laid it on his shoulders, and said to the people that were with him, What ye see me doing, do quickly as I. And they cut down likewise every man a branch, and went after Abimelech, and laid them against the place of gathering, and burnt the place of gathering over them with fire. And they died, even all the men of the tower of Sisima, about 1,000 men and women. And Abimelech went out of Beth-el-Berith, and encamped against Thebes, and took it. And there was a strong tower in the midst of the city, and thither all the men and the women of the city fled, and shut the door without them, and went up on the roof of the tower. And Abimelech drew near to the tower, and they besieged it. And Abimelech drew near to the door of the tower to burn it with fire. And a woman cast a piece of a millstone upon the head of Abimelech, and broke his skull. And he cried out quickly to the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, Draw thy sword, and slay me, lest at any time they should say, A woman slew him. And his young man thrust him through, and he died. And the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, and they went each to his place. So God requited the wickedness of Abimelech, which he wrought against his father, in slaying his 70 brethren. And all the wickedness of the men of Sychem God requited upon their head, and the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal, came upon them. Psalm 74, 75 in Hebrew. For the end, destroy not, a psalm of a song for Asaph. We will give thanks to thee, O God. We will give thanks, and call upon thy name. I will declare all thy wonderful works. When I shall take a set time, I will judge righteously. The earth is dissolved, and all that dwell in it. I strengthen its pillars. Pause. I said unto the transgressors, Do not transgress, and to the sinners, Lift not up the horn. Lift not up your horn on high. Speak not unrighteousness against God. For good comes neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the desert mountains. For God is the judge. He puts down one, and raises up another. For there is a cup in the hand of the Lord, full of unmingled wine, and he has turned it from side to side. But his dregs have not been wholly poured out. All the sinners of the earth shall drink them. But I will exult forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob, and I will break all the horns of the sinners. But the horns of the righteous one shall be exalted. Proverbs chapter 15, verses 19 through 24. The ways of sluggards are strewn with thorns, but those of the diligent are made smooth. A wise son gladdens his father, but a foolish son sneers at his mother. The ways of a foolish man are void of sense, but a wise man proceeds on his way aright. They that honor not counsels put off deliberation, but counsel abides in the hearts of counselors. A bad man will by no means attend to counsel, neither will he say anything seasonable, or good for the common weal. The thoughts of the wise are ways of life, that he may turn aside and escape from hell. The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 4, verses 1 through 30. And Jesus, being full of the Holy Ghost, returned from Jordan, and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being 40 days tempted of the devil. And in those days he did eat nothing, and when they were ended, he afterward hungered. And the devil said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, command this stone that it be made bread. And Jesus answered him, saying, It is written, that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God. And the devil, taking him up into a high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. The devil said unto him, All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will I give it. If thou therefore wilt worship me, all shall be thine. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. And he brought him to Jerusalem, and set him on a pinnacle of the temple, and said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down from hence. For it is written, He shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone. And Jesus answering said unto him, It is said, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And when the devil had ended all the temptation, he departed from him for a season. And Jesus returned into the power of the Spirit into Galilee, and there went out a fame of him through all the region round about. And he taught in their synagogues, being glorified of all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and stood up for to read. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And he closed the book, and he gave it again to the minister, and sat down. And the eyes of all them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And began to say unto them, This day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears. And all bare him witness, and wondered at the gracious words which proceeded out of his mouth. And they said, Is not this Joseph's son? And he said unto them, Ye will surely say unto me this proverb, Physician, heal thyself. Whatsoever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also here in thy country. And he said, Verily I say unto you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. But I tell you of a truth, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elias, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, when famine was throughout all the land. But unto none of them was Elias sent, save unto Sarepta, a city of Sidon, unto a woman that was a widow. And many lepers were in Israel in the time of Eliseus the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, saving Naaman the Syrian. And all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath, and rose up, and thrust him out of the city, and led him unto the brow of the hill whereupon the city was built, that they might cast him down headlong. But he, passing through the midst of them, went his way.